Welcome to CDROAM, your newest companion for travel, adventure, and discovery. You've joined us just in time for a tour of my favorite garden of food and vines, the lovely but not so demure Sonoma wine country. Hi, I'm Carmen Miranda. All right, actually, I'm Anthony Diaz-Blue, but I played Carmen Miranda, fruit salad hat and all, at one of the Sonoma Valley wine auctions. For charity, you understand. But you're sure to find in the tour ahead that we have a lot of fun here in Sonoma, making fine wine and great friends. I'm here to be your personal wine and food advisor. You'll find my notes and recommendations tucked into the CD holder along with your map. But our special guide through the fabled Sonoma wine country is the returning host of our sister edition, Napa Uncorked. Just remember, there are nearly 200 Sonoma wineries. He can't possibly mention them all, so feel free to explore on your own, too. Now, on behalf of CDROAM, I'm pleased to introduce a man of wit and sophistication, a gentleman with charm, good taste, and, oddly enough, 3 names. David, please take us away.
Well, hello there. I'm David Hyde Pierce. Thanks for joining me on this CD-ROAM excursion into the valleys of Sonoma County. We're going to cover a lot of ground, so keep your map handy. Also, be sure you have your Hungarian phrase books, energy bars, and tips on wrestling alligators. What's that? Confused? Well, listen, Toto, we're not in Napa anymore. Sonoma's wine districts sprawl across a half-dozen valleys, over mountains, hills, and the rolling Carneros. I'll be leading you generally from south to north. And like neighboring Napa, Sonoma is full of stories. Heroic and amusing tales of great grapes and the masterful winemakers who crush them. We'll sample some of those stories. But speaking of sampling, if you're making winery stops along the way, please drive carefully and taste responsibly. Safety is no joking matter. Nothing is more important. And I'm in no position to help as your designated driver. Now, check your seatbelts. Let's roam. The Sonoma Difference. The hills of Mayacamas separate Sonoma wine country from its more celebrated neighbor, Napa Valley. But the real differences are more than mountainous. Both take their wine seriously, but Sonoma takes itself a lot less seriously. The big difference? Well, it's attitude. If Napa is tuxedos, Sonoma is blue jeans. If Napa is a rousing Wagnerian aria, Sonoma is a Tarzan yodel. You get the picture? Sonoma vintners are a sassy lot. Start with the Ravenswood Winery. Its motto, Nullum Vinum Flaccidum, no wimpy wines. Or take the management of that venerable winery, Gunlock Bunshoe. The boss has been known to sneak over the hills to hijack the Napa wine train Old West style and then hand out Sonoma wines to the Napa passengers. And Sonoma's Barefoot Winery, with its already playful footprint label, tested French sensibilities, or at least the fabled French sense of humor, with a line of wines labeled Chateau Lafite. Get it? Barefoot? Lafite? Yes, well, the French weren't that amused either, especially the sober folks at Chateau Lafite Rothschild. The compromise result? Chateau Lafite. Over the years, Sonoma's feisty attitude has trumped all manner of trials and tribulations. When old Sonoma Plaza was threatened by fire a century ago, one downtown winery rushed to the rescue with 1,000 gallons of barreled wine to douse the flames. It was considered vintage well spent. And when the vine-eating pest phylloxera took a big bite out of the 1992 vintage of Dry Creek vineyards, The stubborn owner salvaged what grapes he could and produced a Cabernet Rosé under the cheeky label Bug Creak. And what other wine region has among its historic winemakers the son of a samurai warrior, or young Attila, the Hungarian? Attila was one of the winemaking sons of a giant of commercial wine in Sonoma, a Hungarian émigré named Augustin Haraszti. Haraszti the Elder arrived in pre-Civil War America with a lot of money, mostly his wife's, and a gold-braided Royal Hungarian Guards military uniform. Both the cash and the costume were big hits on the American frontier. Everyone called him simply the Colonel, and in his day, Colonel Haraszti was to wine made in California what Colonel Sanders is to chickens fried in Kentucky. Ooh, this Cabernet, how do you say, it's finger-licking good. Well, here's how that happened. First, the Hungarian took Washington by storm. He was on the A-list for all the presidential balls. Then, he worked his way west, starting a town in Wisconsin. Then he led a wagon train to California. He was the sheriff of San Diego County, and then Cousin Frank picked him to run the new San Francisco Mint. That would be my cousin, my great-great-great-great-great, I don't remember, cousin Frank, as in Franklin Pierce, the not-so-great 14th President of the United States. Alas, controversy plagued the colonel and threatened to embarrass the Pierces, the president. Haraszti was indicted. Now, it wasn't Watergate, just some dust missing from the mint. Okay, it was gold dust, but the colonel didn't filch it. He was exonerated, but after all of that, he'd had enough of politics and patronage. So he moved to Sonoma, where he was among the first to discover that in this vast garden, gold could actually be grown on vines. The Harasztis established Buena Vista Vineyards and started sweeping wine competitions with their first vintages. County fairs, the California State Fair, it was instant success. In fact, the colonel and his sons led California's first wine boom back in the 1860s. But it was the Hungarians' big shopping spree to Europe that really put California on the world wine map. The colonel sailed for Bordeaux to collect samples of European grapevines. He ended up with thousands of cuttings from about 300 grape varieties from most of the world's important wine regions. Back home in Sonoma, his Buena Vista vineyards became the United Nations of grapes. French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, German, Swiss, they thrived. And the publicity, it was like an intercontinental coming-out party for that new debutante on the vineyard block, California wine. One of those who heard about Sonoma was a British-born mystic with a flock of devotees, mostly from Europe and upstate New York. The mystic, Thomas Lake Harris, brought much of his flock from a commune on the shores of Lake Erie to the hills of Sonoma in 1875 and established a 700-acre western commune just outside Santa Rosa. It was called the Brotherhood of the New Life. Actually, there weren't that many brothers in the hood, but there were quite a number of rich widows. Go figure. For a time, the New Life community operated as a dairy, its younger acolytes selling milk door to door. Then came the wine boom of 1880, and it didn't take a sixth sense to divine opportunity. The mystic and his widows promptly built a magnificent winery and called it Fountain Grove. His first winemaker, Kanae Nagasawa, was the young son of a samurai he'd met at a university in Scotland. Young Nagasawa had learned winemaking at the mystic's retreat in upstate New York. And you know what they say about wine from New York. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Just kidding. It turned out that the convivial Japanese native with his surprising Scottish accent had a true Sonoman's gift for making good wine and easy friends. Under Nagasawa's direction, Fountain Grove flourished. Not just a Sonoma giant, it was probably America's most famous wine label at the close of the 19th century. But the real father of California wine has to be Mexico's territorial governor for California, General Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo. General Vallejo turned out to be less a master of warfare than a master of wine fare. He built the first commercial winery in Sonoma, and through the early 1840s, he gave away vast tracts of government land for more vineyards. And when political unrest started to boil over, well, remember the Alamo? Forget it. That was Texas. This is Sonoma. I mean, Mexico lost California something like this. Hola, who is there?
We're the Bear Flag Rebels. We've come to arrest you.
Okay. Would you like some wine?
You're outnumbered, General. We're heavily armed.
Si, comprendo. You prefer red or white?
Make it easy on yourself, General.
Okay, then. I have a muy bueno Zinfandel. So, in true Sonoma style, General Vallejo welcomed his captors and surrendered his authority in California over a round of fine Sonoma wine. And that's the truth. Viva the Sonoma Difference! Sonoma South. We start our tour where the modern California wine country started, in Sonoma Valley. Legend has it that local Indians called it the Valley of the Moon. A lovely legend, but more likely originated by local real estate agents. By some accounts, Sonoma derives from an Indian word for nose. It seems that when Spanish explorers arrived, they were introduced to El Jefe, the local leader, who had a big one. Nose, that is. Although, you know what they say. Anyway, word is that he was affectionately known to the tribe as Chief Nose. So, welcome to the Chief's Valley, a beautiful place by any name. It contains 3 of Sonoma County's 11 distinct wine-growing regions, or what the French call appellations. Each has its own unique blend of soil, climate, and sun exposure, all factors that affect the grape. Furthest south is the Carneros district, cool and favorable for such grapes as Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. They like a bit of chill in their mornings, unlike the Merlots and Zinfandels who like to keep the thermostat in a more balmy range. One of the first tasting rooms encountered just inside Sonoma's Carneros is the lonely little Roach Winery on Highway 121. A white ranch fence and yellow roses mark the entry. A picnic area overlooks the Duck Pond and San Pablo Bay, and a tour can include horseback riding. Increasingly popular in this neighborhood is the Tuscan-styled Vianza Winery and Italian Market on Highway 121. It's also a favorite site for picnics and weddings if you're in the mood. Along with the traditional Sonoma wines, Vianza also produces some Italian varietals from such hard-working immigrant grapes as Barbera and Nebbiolo. The founders of Vianza also fit the plucky Sonoma image quite well. You see, Sam Sebastiani and wife Vicky started Vianza after they were fired from a competitor's winery. Now, it just happens that the competitor was also family. The pink slips were issued by Sam's mama and little brother. And that branch of the family still runs the Sebastiani winery in town. But Sam and Vicky launched an all-new winery of their own. Hey, what's a little family feud among the grapes? Just as Napa's Mondavi brothers split and created 2 wine empires out of one, so this sibling rivalry inspired a beautiful new winery as well. And now, just like the Mondavis, all sides of Sonoma's Sebastiani family are making good quality wines too. But the Vianza winery is more than a monument to grapes. It's also for the birds. It's pro-bird. It comes with a 90-acre bird preserve. Lucky visitors can sample great wines and see great blue herons. It's hard to imagine how Little Family Feud could have done so much to improve the environment. Across the highway, Klein cellars, where Rhone-styled wines are specialties of the house. Sample Zinfandels blended with French varietals like Mourvèdre and Carignan. Some of Klein's most interesting wines are available only at the tasting room, part of an 1850s farmhouse. The winery's picnic area comes with a view of Sonoma Valley. A short distance up the highway is a bit of Barcelona, the Gloria Ferrer Champagne Caves. The stylish tasting room and terrace is part of a hillside villa overlooking vineyards and the bird preserve. The winery is owned by the world's largest producer of sparkling wines, Freixenet of Spain. The cellars are open for tours. Schug Carneros Estates Winery, just off Highway 121 on Bono Road, is a touch and a taste of the Rhine wine region. Even if your German's a little rusty, stop by and sprechen Sie Wein mit der Staff, ja? Further north is the town of Sonoma and its old plaza where the Sonoma Mission still stands. It was the last of California's missions, inspired in part by a shortage of church wine in San Francisco. The San Francisco Mission had a vineyard, all right, but it just turned out that the Mission by the Bay was mission impossible for grape growing. Mark Twain once complained that he was never colder than one summer afternoon in San Francisco. Well, tell it to the grapes, Mark. They needed sweaters all summer. The vineyards were simply too cold, too foggy, too often. The result was a chronic shortage of sacramental wine. Sometimes services had to be canceled. They needed warmer vineyards, or that water into wine recipe, and fast. So Sonoma landed a mission. Its new vineyards promptly produced happy and contented grapes, and San Francisco hasn't had a wine shortage since. In the vicinity of the old mission are the handsome remains of some of the oldest commercial wineries in the region. Most notable is Buena Vista on Old Winery Road. It takes visitors back to the days of Colonel Harristy. Tastings and tours are offered in the old stone press house the Hungarians built in 1863. A postscript on the Colonel. Having pioneered the California wine country, he left to launch Nicaragua's rum country. No, it never happened. While looking over some potential plantation property, the Colonel slipped and fell into a river, and apparently the local alligators were hungry for Hungarians. Well, anyway, the Colonel was never seen again, but his Sonoma legacy lives on. Bartholomew Park Winery on Vineyard Lane is part of the Colonel's original Buena Vista estate. It was later a hospital, but too late for the Colonel. Now the visitor center includes a wine museum with more on the Harristy family. The Gunlock Bunshu Winery on Denmark Street is run by the 5th generation of Bunshus. They seem to have a lot of fun making seriously good wines. The winery's home vineyard, Rhine Farm, dates back to the days of General Vallejo and Colonel Harristy. Ravenswood Winery on Garrick Road can pour some of the best Zinfandel in any tasting room in the region. Some say you can cut it with a knife, but why would you do that? One thing you won't find here is wimpy wine. Besides world-famous Zinfandels, Ravenswood delivers first-rate Merlots and Cabernet Sauvignon, too. The stone winery built into a hill is also full of charm. If time permits, a Ravenswood winery tour typically includes a bonus treat, tastings straight from the barrel. And word up, try the grilled trout on the patio. Back near Sonoma Plaza on 4th Street is Sebastiani Sonoma Cask Cellars, for years the biggest producer in the county. It's the winery that Jug Wines built into a giant. Well, Jug Wines and the late August Sebastiani, the little old winemaker in bib overalls. The century-old Sebastiani Winery is a tourist favorite, featuring huge carved wood casks and an inviting tasting room to sample its premium wines of today. Sonoma Plaza is worth exploring too. It was designed by General Vallejo himself. Today it has restaurants, hotels, and shops of all kinds. And it's the home of Sonoma Jack cheese. There are wine stores with most of the local labels, and Sebastiani has a tasting room on the square as well. Alas, there is no Williams Sonoma in Sonoma. But once upon a time, there was a Sonoma Williams. Chuck Williams, that is. He started the gourmet kitchenware empire out of his little hardware shop on Broadway in 1954. Ever since, the classy brand has helped spread Sonoma's fame well beyond the world of vines. Still, vines define Sonoma. And from the plaza that General Vallejo built, all roads lead to wine. Now that we're deep in the heart of wine country, let's consider some of the nagging questions of wine etiquette that we all wrestle with from time to time. Like, is there really a different wine glass required for each and every wine varietal? And why don't any of them fit in your dishwasher? Or which wine should be chilled or served at room temperature? And between your igloo and mine, what exactly is room temperature anyway? Or does wine have to breathe? And just how do you perform mouth-to-mouth on a grape? Well, first things first, what's expected of you in that little restaurant ritual? You know the one. The waiter comes with the wine, shows you the label, as if giving you one last chance to order that $10,000 Barolo instead. He presents the cork, then pours a splash of wine into your glass and steps back. What do you do now? Well, if you lived back in the days of kings at the dawn of this ritual, you were probably the official royal taster, and your assignment would be simple. You take a swig and die. Or not, and if not, well then let the party begin. But today, they've removed the life or death stakes. Although for those prone to stage fright, it can still be an intimidating moment. But it needn't be. Just remember, there are no hard and fast rules, except one. Don't put the cork up your nose. In fact, don't even bother to sniff it. The only real test of a wine is in the wine itself. So, pick up the glass, swirl it gently, stirring up the wine enough to release its aromatic qualities. Then dip your nose into the glass. Oh, okay, one more rule, not too far, Chief Big Nose. Now sip, fill your mouth with the wine, slosh it around, make a little noise, slurping is permitted. This tasting is not the point where you change your mind about your order, although the waiter will very likely fall down and kiss your shoes if you decide, even at this point, on that $10,000 Barolo. No, this pre-dinner tasting is intended simply to confirm that the wine hasn't spoiled. And believe me when I say you need little instruction to recognize this unwelcome bit of chemistry in your wine. The worst is called corkage, commonly a result of the cork's failure to keep its seal. How does that affect the wine? Well, some would say it turns to vinegar, but I think that's an insult to vinegar. How about wine that captures the ripe bouquet of your cat's last hairball? Yeah. Chances are you'll notice the problem at first whiff. If the aroma in your glass is less fruit and more wet Sunday morning newspaper, skip the sip. But if your sinuses are out of order, you can always trust your gag reflex. One caveat. If your wine turns out to be just a bit, what shall we say, past its prime, that can be much more subtle, but don't worry. When in doubt, ask the waiter's opinion. If your server sips and bolts for the restroom, then signal for a fresh look at the wine list. Okay, etiquette dilemma number 2. Assuming you're home and serving wine without the safety net of a professional sommelier, what kind of wine glasses should you have on hand? From bulbous brandy snifter to elegant champagne flute, there's a specially designed glass for virtually every wine, and for good reason. The wide, open-topped red wine glass releases the aroma in billowing waves as you swirl the wine, whereas a smaller, more closed-top glass concentrates the more delicate bouquet of a white wine and helps it hold its chill. But if your budget or your cupboard space is limited, here's my solution. In a word, big. The stemware, I mean. It can always be big, at least 10 ounces. A nice big wine glass lets everyone savor whatever is poured, reds or whites. Just never fill the glass beyond a third. That leaves room to swirl and sniff. Now, let's also simplify the temperature quandary. The word here is cool. That's right, cool is cool. Even for red wines. Keep in mind that the room temperature rule for reds originated back in the days when wine was the nectar of kings, and kings lived in drafty old castles. Room temperatures then tended to a sweaters and slippers chill of 60 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Red flavors are most robust in those cool realms, but they're bullied into the background when warming temperatures, especially up into the mid-70s, bring out strong alcohol influences. White wines can benefit from a bit more chill, but extreme cold is just as harmful to whites as too much warmth is to the reds. Like fingers and toes, the subtle flavors of a white wine are numbed by too much ice. So the simple answer, in red or white, is simply to keep it cool. Finally, one last dilemma. Which wines need help breathing? After all, who wants to serve a wine that's gasping? Well, hold the oxygen tank. Most California wines are made in a style that favors early drinkability, but are also capable of some bottle aging. A little extra breathing is required when we try to rush the aging process. If, for instance, rank impatience or rampant curiosity has driven you to an early opening of an expensive red meant for aging, you might first decant it. The process of pouring the wine from the bottle into a wine pitcher mixes in a big dose of oxygen and accelerates the aging. Right there before your eyes, a decanting can add up to 10 years to a wine's age. 10 years, right before your eyes. Little oxygen and bang, old. That's terrifying. You know how many Hollywood plastic surgeons are out there this very moment trying to subtract the effects of error on fine aging actors? 10 years? I don't know. Maybe it's time to store me in a cool, dry place. Before we resume the wine trails of Sonoma, how about a quick oil check? No, forget the dipstick, Dottie. I'm talking olive oil. You know, the other gift of the gods, liquid gold, the other fruit of wine country, the olive. God bless it. When those first Spanish missionaries came to California, they packed their bags with grapevines, fig cuttings, and olive trees. Bet they had trouble getting that in the overhead compartments. Now, in ancient times, well, at least until the era of Thomas Edison, the olive was among the absolute essentials of life. Its oil used as fuel for lamps, as medicine for the sick, and in rituals, from funerals to the coronation of kings. Today, olive oil is an essential of, yes, gourmet cooking. Well, more than that. Its health qualities have been rediscovered by modern science, too. It's credited with helping digestion and reducing cholesterol. Many health-conscious consumers are replacing butter with olive oil in baking, cooking, and garlic toasting. Credit Sonoma for leading a resurgence of boutique olive oil production in California. Many wine estates also cultivate olives. And the Sonoma Valley Olive Festival is a new annual event that starts each December with the blessing of the olives at the Mission, and then includes a martini shake-off competition to pick the best olive martini in captivity. But one thing always puzzled me about olive oil. The virgin thing. Know what I'm talking about? There's virgin olive oil, there's extra virgin olive oil, and fine virgin, and some Italians are lobbying to recognize super extra virgin olive oil. Which begs the question, how can one virgin olive oil be more virgin than another virgin olive oil? I ask ya. Well, it turns out the whole thing's about acidity levels in the oil. It has nothing to do with virgins whatsoever. Simply put, the lower the acidity, the more extra the virgin. But don't take my word for it. You can sample the differences at an olive oil tasting. If you've never done it, sampled fine olive oils, I mean, now's your chance. Detour immediately to the Olive Press on Arnold Drive in Glen Ellen. The selection is excellent. Local producers and European imports side by side. You can be the judge. The Olive Press also offers books and gifts for all of you olive lovers. Even baby olive trees to add to your own carry-on luggage. During the fall harvest season, you might get lucky enough to witness a pressing. The Olive Press processes the harvests of several local olive growers, a throwback to old Tuscany. Now, if some old Tuscan will throw us back, we'll return to the wine trail. Call of the Valley. Herb Caen, the late San Francisco Chronicle columnist, once described heaven as a place that resembles Sonoma in the spring. Well, the next leg of our winery tour takes us to the very heart of this Garden of Eden. Route 12, the Sonoma Highway, heads north from the plaza to a string of wineries that line our path. Route 12 may look like just another strip of asphalt, but here, it's the highway to Herb's heaven. So let's rock and roll! Oh, and what a coincidence! Almost immediately, there's B.R. Cohn, the winery built by rock and roll. You know the Doobie Brothers? Oh, Rockin' down the highway? Well, Bruce Cohn of B.R. Cohn Winery managed the Doobie Brothers, among other rock bands, before turning down the decibels to hear his Cabernets aging. On the flip side, as they used to say in the days of vinyl records, long before your time, children, B.R. Cohn Winery also produces elegant olive oils. It all comes together in the wine tasting room on a knoll shaded by lovely olive trees. Nearby on the highway is Imagery Estate Winery, with a walking tour of Sonoma's varied wine-growing regions called the Appalachian Trail. Tastings feature some of the lesser-known varietals. On Madrone Road, just off the highway, is Valley of the Moon Winery. Its vineyards have been owned over the years by such historic figures as Civil War hero Fighting Joe Hooker and the family of San Francisco newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst. Back on the highway, Cundy Estate Winery is in a stylish barn near a series of aging caves carved into the hillside. It's especially noted for its Zinfandels from 100-year-old vines. Just up the road, Kenwood Winery provides tastings in a rustic barn setting. It was built in 1906 by the Pagani brothers. They peddled jug wines door to door until Prohibition slammed their doors shut. This neighborhood also has roadside tasting centers shared by groups of small wine producers. One is the Wine Room on the highway. Samples available include Adler Fells and Kale Cellars. But be sure to try the Smothers Brothers wine, no joke. The Comic Brothers changed their label to Remick Ridge to honor their grandfather, but also to reduce confusion. Seems too many people thought Smothers Brothers Winery was a gag, like Whoopie Wine or Rosanna-Dana Rosé. But no, the only punchline here is some seriously fine wine. Then comes one of the grand estates on the highway, the très chic Chateau Saint-Jean.
It's Chateau Saint-Jean.
What?
It's Chateau Saint-Jean.
I'm sorry?
It's not Chateau Saint-Jean, it's Chateau Saint-Jean.
You're kidding.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. For a moment there I forgot we were in Sonoma. Saint-Jean, indeed. It would be if we were on the Napa side of the hills, but in Sonoma, get a hold of yourself. The estate is plain and simple Chateau Saint-Jean. Chateau Saint-Jean's Mediterranean architecture is complemented by fountains and greenery. Its spacious tasting room doubles as a stylish market and gift shop, and one of the best views of the valley is your reward for climbing Jean's medieval-style tower overlooking 250 acres at the foot of Sugarloaf Ridge. I know. This is Mansion Row on the highway. You can play the role of arriving royalty at the manor houses of nearby Ledson Winery or Landmark Vineyards. Both offer elegant picnic settings. Landmark throws in a horse-drawn wagon tour and bocce ball. But wait, we're not quite done with this corner of Sonoma. The rustic little town of Glen Ellen also offers shops, restaurants, and lodgings for a range of tastes and tax brackets. Glen Ellen also is the gateway to Jack London State Park, the home and final resting place of an American icon. After writing his classic novel Call of the Wild, the author settled into this mountainside estate he called the Beauty Ranch, where he raised grapes between chapters. Tourists can visit the ruins of Wolf House, tour the museum in the House of Happy Walls, and hike the wooded grounds. But leave time on the way up Sonoma Mountain to visit the Benziger Family Winery on London Ranch Road. Tours aboard a motorized tram are among the best in the region, from vineyard to bottled results. Tastings are in the Benzigers' old ranch barn and aging cellar. And a bit off the tourist maps on Bennett Valley Road is Matanzas Creek Winery, makers of some of the best French-styled wines in California. A 2-acre terraced lavender garden with thousands of plants, including rare perennials, makes this corner of the Sonoma Mountains a special destination as well for plant lovers who love great wine. Thankfully, little has changed on these slopes since Jack London rode horseback across the hills. The spectacle of nature remains as spectacular here now as when the exhilarated writer described it a century ago. I ride over my beautiful ranch. The air is wine. The grapes on a score of rolling hills are red with autumn flame. Across Sonoma Mountain, wisps of sea fog are stealing. The afternoon sun smolders in the drowsy sky. I have everything to make me glad I am alive. She was once a beautiful damsel, a pale but full-bodied grape with elegant French roots. They called her Viognier. The problem was simple. She was not Chardonnay, the most popular white wine grape in all the land. So poor Viognier was ignored. Her acreage dwindled. Finally, she was all but abandoned, even in her place of birth, the sun-blessed Rhone Valley of southern France. Extinction seemed just around the vine row when, out of the west, rode the Rhone Rangers. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. Well, okay, it was only a few years back, in the 70s and 80s. A maverick band of Sonoma winemakers took the lead, creating a group that called itself the Rhone Rangers. They dedicated space in their vineyards for some of the great Rhone grapes, mostly reds like Syrah, Grenache, Cinsault, and Mourvedre. Since then, the big, juicy Syrah wines in particular have steadily gained favor. Today, they're popular alternatives to the leading big reds of California, the Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Zinfandel wines. But what about those cries for help from the lovely little Viognier? Well, Rangers to the rescue. Now, Viognier vineyard space is multiplying, particularly in Sonoma. And California Viognier wine production is growing. Even in France, there's a resurgence. But by many accounts, the hero's medal belongs to the Rhone Rangers. Their leadership may have saved Chardonnay's loveliest rival. Stay tuned for further developments. And meanwhile, if Viognier should ask,
Oh, monsieur, who were those masked men?
you can tell her, why, those were the Rhone Rangers! The town of Santa Rosa is our jumping-off point for touring the next winery region. It was the home of two great Americans, the botanist who invented the russet potato, Luther Burbank, and the genius who invented peanuts. No, not the salted ones. I mean Charles Schulz, who invented the classic comic strip Peanuts, with Charlie Brown and Snoopy and Lucy and Linus, the whole gang. No doubt those perpetual kids will one day grow up to be connoisseurs of all the fine wine that is produced around them, especially Snoopy, who has the cultured taste and the nose of a gifted sommelier. The Russian River wine region sprawls to the north and west of Santa Rosa in a pie-shaped triangle formed by Route 12, Highway 101, and the meandering Russian River. This sprawling landscape defies defined touring routes, but it's a great place to get lost. I mean, to be lost. Go ahead, ad-lib a little, try some tour improv, wander around and bump into an unexpected winery or two. But for those with limited time, or those driving cars with those stupid global positioning systems, you have made a wrong turn. I know I have. You have made a wrong turn. Be quiet. You have made a wrong... Oh, go navigate yourself. Well, here's one possible route. And to start, we just head out the north side of town for Paradise Ridge Winery on Thomas Lake Harris Drive. If that address sounds familiar, remember that Thomas Lake Harris was the mystic with the rich widows and the samurai's son, and the founder of Fountain Grove. Paradise Ridge Winery, near the ruins of the old estate, keeps an historical exhibit dedicated to the original Fountain Grove winemaker, Kenae Nagasawa. Here's a footnote to that Sonoma tale. The samurai's son ended up owning Fountain Grove. It was a gift from the mystic who married one of his rich devotees and retreated to New York, never to return. Today, Paradise Ridge Winery offers its own gifts. Great views of the Russian River Valley, a sculpture garden, and glorious Sonoma sunsets. Next, we follow our nose to the Kendall-Jackson Wine Center on Fulton Road, just off Highway 101. Here, the sampling includes nature's perfume. On the Kendall-Jackson grounds, 2 gardens, one devoted to red wines and the other to whites, are planted in the fruits, vegetables, flowers, and herbs that parallel the aromas and flavors of popular wines. So stop, taste, and exercise those nostrils. This is one place to savor the air as well as the wine.
You won't be able to miss the Martinelli Winery on River Road. The old hops barn is painted a bright red. The winery is noted for its red products, too, especially Zinfandel wines. Its century-old Zinfandel vineyards thrive on the steep slopes of Jackass Hill. See, even the Sonoma Hills have attitude. The winery at Deloche Vineyards on Olivet Road was founded by a San Francisco fireman responding to the siren song of great Chardonnay and Zinfandel. The tasting room is a grand redwood building among the vines.
Now keep an eye out for Laguna Road and the historic winery of Martini and Prati. The old 1940s water tower may help guide you on your final approach. But first, a step back in time to the dark ages in California wine country, also known as the Prohibition era. Most Sonoma and Napa area wineries were shuttered when voters passed the 18th Amendment to criminalize alcoholic drink, which, despite the passage of time, still raises the eternal question, what were they thinking? Now, a few wineries survived. Most of those catered to legal loopholes, and one loophole big enough to drive a railroad tanker car through allowed the production of wine for religious purposes. How do you say Mazel Tov in Italian? Well, Narciso Martini must have figured it out. He landed the New York rabbi account, and all through Prohibition, his Sonoma winery shipped tens of thousands of gallons of wine by rail cars to a bottling plant back east. After Prohibition, he sold that East Coast bottling plant to the future founders of Manischewitz Wines. Today, the Martini and Prati Winery on Laguna Road is a living museum and a cozy family farm with picnic grounds. The tasting room was once a stable and bunkhouse for Italian field hands. Redwood tanks, some more than 100 years old, are still used. And tradition lives on in another quaint and wonderful way. Visitors can fill empty jugs directly from the wine tanks.
Topolos at Russian River Vineyard on Gravenstein Highway brings a touch of Greek style and flavor to the valley. The family even operates a Greek restaurant at the winery. Oppa!
The Russian River itself cuts through the heart of Pinot Noir country. Pinot Noir is the starring grape along with Chardonnay in most sparkling wines.
One of the most beautiful settings for a winery anywhere in the wine world surrounds Corbel champagne cellars on River Road. The century-old winery occupies a redwood-forested bluff overlooking the Russian River. Years before wine production came to this area, the brothers Corbel, 3 Czech boys from the Austrian Empire, opened a lumber mill along the river. They became major suppliers of the wood used in 19th century cigar boxes. During that same period, the late 1800s, the valley also produced large amounts of hops, a major ingredient of beer. A few of the region's hop-drying kilns remain standing today. Beer and cigars. Who could have predicted that from such roots would arise one of the world's great wine regions? Corbel offers daily tours of its historic champagne cellars and a microbrewery. A separate tour is available, except in winter, of the Corbel family's antique rose gardens. And a gourmet deli provides food and patio seating among the magnificent redwoods.
Okay, back on the road again. We follow the river. But here is the dilemma, at least for the driver. There are great wineries on both sides of the river. Someone has to make a choice, unless of course you're amphibious. Ribbit. Okay, so let's say you lean left. We're off down the West Side Highway.
The Davis Bynum Winery sits beside a ravine among the tall redwoods that shade its picnic area. The tasting room features notable Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays, and the winery also includes an art gallery. At Rocchioli Vineyards and Winery, third-generation Rocchiolis produce first-rate Pinot Noir and Chardonnay wines. A modest, understated tasting room overlooks the vineyards, but the wines served there reflect the family's close ties to the land and their vines. Neighboring Hop Kiln Winery has an idyllic setting. The restored Hops Barn serves as tasting room, art gallery, and gift shop. The picnic area outside includes a duck pond and assorted little web-footed beggars. Up the road at nearby Rabbit Ridge Vineyards, Visitors can taste not only standard varietals, but also the more unusual, from such French and Italian grapes as Marsanne, Dolcetto, Alicante Bouschet, and Barbera. Oh, but wait,
What if you leaned right? There are winery gems on that route, too. Rodney Strong Vineyards on Old Redwood Highway was created by a Broadway dancer who hoofed it west more than 40 years ago.
he tapped into the wine boom before waltzing into retirement. Bada bing, bada boom. The tasting room is in a pyramid building with an art gallery and outdoor picnic area, but alas, no dance floor. And nearby Fappiano Vineyards, also on Old Redwood Highway, is another of those Italian family wineries that dot the Sonoma landscape. This one dates back 5 generations to the first Fappiano from Genoa. The tasting room is in a simple wood cottage. Russian River winemaking actually dates back to the Russians, who first settled the area 2 centuries ago. They imported grapevines from Peru and raised food to feed their settlers in Alaska. In the end, Russia kept Siberia but ceded Sonoma. Go figure. No doubt they're still kicking themselves.
Psst, psst, Natasha. What you say we defect to Sonoma? I hear the Reds are still very big there.
Now let us sing the praises of jug wine. Yes, I know its reputation. Over the past 30 years, jug wine has come to be a term of derision, a pejorative, an insult, another way to say cheap. But what's not understood is the role of jug and bulk wines in the modern California wine boom.
Here's the story. Back before Prohibition, wine was commonly sold by the jug, and I'm talking about the good stuff. It was often peddled door to door. "Hurry, Mildred, that's not Avon calling!" Anyway, in those days, a family's empty wine jugs could be refilled at local grocery markets, right out of a barrel, wine on tap, so to speak. And Sonoma wine, like all the rest, was routinely shipped across the country in bulk, often in railroad tank cars, and the Atchison, Topeka, and the Chardonnay. Well, it wasn't until World War II that winery bottling became common, thanks again to that mama of all inventions, necessity. Bulk transport dried up during the war, you see, when all those railroad tank cars, like our dads and granddads, got called for defense duty. Prohibition and then World War II. What a double whammy. Who could fault California wineries in those years for turning out some rather unremarkable and inconsistent blends? And at the same time, consumers still were ordering martinis over Merlots, and scotch and soda over Chardonnay and cheese. Ah, but the times they were a-changin'. First, the Yanks just home from Europe returned with a taste for French and Italian wines. And second, there were the Gallo boys, Ernest and Giulio. What Harristy the Hungarian did for California wine marketing in the 1860s, the brothers Gallo did again a century later, but this time in the retail trenches, one store at a time. With an aggressive sales force, Gallo bottles and jugs came to dominate retail shelves, leading the way for California wines of all labels. Another of the prominent jug wine producers of the 1960s was Sonoma's Sebastiani winery. Like Gallo, the winery made solid blends of reasonable quality and good value. Jug wines became a staple of youthful, cost-conscious consumers buying economy-sized wine.
One result? A stunningly swift consumer conversion to wine. So thank the Jug Band for leading American consumers out of the wilderness of whiskeys and ryes and into the light of, what, Hardy Burgundy? Okay, so it was only a first step, but those generic blends served as beginner wines for a lot of us. And some jug wines remain very popular today. But thankfully, tastes mature. The wine boom of the 1970s, which continues unabated even as we speak, is driven by demand for premium varietal wines. The big reds from Cabernet Sauvignon and Zinfandel grapes, the complex Pinot Noirs, the bold and buttery Chardonnays. So, you ask, how does a self-respecting wine sophisticate today find high-quality wines in economy-sized bottles without being caught holding the jugs? Well, the gang in marketing came up with one solution. First, they dumped the jug's characteristic finger-hole grip. Then they consulted a French dictionary. Now widely available, but no longer a jug, certain large bottles of fine premium wines are respectfully addressed these days as magnums. So, get down to your local wine store and check out those magnums. The Healdsburg Hub. The town of Healdsburg was founded by a fortune seeker from Ohio who failed in the gold fields, then hit the jackpot in real estate, an early version of the eternal California story. Harmon Heald laid out his town on a neat grid around a Spanish-styled plaza and his own general store. What luck! First, a rail line came to the town, then the wine pioneers. Vineyards sprang up all around the hills and valleys of this Russian River village. For a guy who couldn't find gold in the middle of a gold rush, you might say that the gold just found him. Modern Healdsburg sits at the center, the vortex, the hub of three great wine-growing regions: the Russian River, Dry Creek, and Alexander Valleys. Chalk Hill is close enough to spit a grapeseed at, but watch the wind. The rest of our winery tours will use lovely Healdsburg as a convenient launch pad, but don't rush off. Downtown Healdsburg is a star in its own right. Gourmet dining, unique shops, and luxury lodging surround the central plaza, itself popular for picnics and occasional summer concerts. And with tasting rooms popping up all around the plaza, every day is a wine festival in Healdsburg. Check out the square. Among shops on the Healdsburg Avenue perimeter is the Wine Country store. That one's operated by Kendall Jackson and features some of its other popular labels from Sonoma, including La Crema and Stone Street. Across the plaza along Center Street, there's Rosenblum Cellars, founded by a Bay Area veterinarian. And we'll leave it to you to decide, is the vet's wine the cat's meow, or is he just pussyfooting around? Woof. Windsor wine can only be found here on Center Street or in a mail-order catalog. It's not sold in stores. And the small family-owned Selby Winery has a Center Street tasting room and photo art gallery to show off its own works of art, from Chardonnays to Zinfandels. Among the newest faces at the square, and in the tasting room business, is Gallo. Through the years, the family never opened its wineries to the public, even as its blended wines dominated American wine sales out of its headquarters in distant Modesto, California. But now, the historically private folks at E&J Gallo Winery have made a daring turn from bulk blends to high-quality premium varietals. And most welcome, they finally opened a door. And that door is on Center Street, too, just off the plaza. Nearby, on Piper Street, is the Sonoma County Wine Library, for those looking for samples in black and white. Beyond the plaza, Healdsburg has other worthwhile wineries to visit, some of them steeped in history. Close in on Grove Street, the Segasio family vineyard celebrates more than a century of Sonoma winemaking. Specialty of the house is Zinfandel from some of the oldest vines in California. The first Segasio in Sonoma planted some of those vines back before the Wright brothers first defied gravity. The family's Italian roots also show in their Sangiovese wines and white varietals like Pinot Grigio and Arneis. Simi Winery on Healdsburg Avenue is a handsome tribute to a stubborn and resourceful beauty, La Bella Signorina Isabelle Simi. Her father and an uncle, immigrant brothers from Tuscany, started the winery. Tragically, both brothers died in 1904, the same year that lovely Isabelle was crowned Flower Queen of Healdsburg. Although she was only 18, and now on her own, the Flower Queen took over the family business and quickly blossomed into one of the top winemakers of the region. During Prohibition, though unable to sell their wine, she and her husband kept making and storing it in the winery cellar. When Prohibition finally ended and consumer demand surged anew, the Simi cellar was a goldmine of nicely aged wine ready for market. Isabel celebrated repeal by planting a grove of redwood trees around the old stone winery. Still today, visitors can continue the celebration in the shade of Isabel's redwoods. So from the wine to the scenery, a Flower Queen's loveliest influences linger on in Healdsburg.
Vita Bella.
Mother Nature was in a good mood the day she assembled Sonoma. Signs of her generosity burst out all over, from hills and streams, soil and sunshine, in the mists and on the breezes. Clearly, Adam and Eve settled for second best. But don't take my word for it. Ask an expert, like the great American botanist Luther Burbank. This, he said, is the chosen spot of all this earth, as far as nature is concerned. There you have it. Of course, it's not news to the grapes. They've been moving here by the bunches since little Luther was but a bud himself. Then, as now, grapes simply loved Sonoma. And, thank goodness, so did the Italians. They started emigrating to Sonoma in great numbers back in the 1880s. Here, they worked hard, they bought vineyards, they made wine. Then, confronting the Great Plague of Prohibition, they saved Sonoma. Actually, what they did was save the whole California wine industry, lock, stock, and oak barrel. Here's how it happened. First of all, the Italian immigrants were a hardy lot. They had to be. Back home, they survived earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tidal waves, droughts, depressions, and political upheaval. And then they hauled their families across the Atlantic and then across the continental United States. Remember, Wilbur and Orville still hadn't invented the 747. Think of the ordeal, months and months of tiny Italian children asking, "Are we there yet?" The newcomers arrived with old-world recipes for pastas, sauces, and wines. In rural Italy, households typically made their own wine in Mama's cucina. When Prohibition closed most of America's wineries, that Italian tradition of home winemaking came to the rescue. Well, that and an old American tradition, the legal loophole. The Prohibition Act that banned wine and liquor sales left an opening for non-commercial home winemaking. Mama's Kitchen Winery was legal, just like back home. All she needed was the grape juice. To Sonoma's Italian grape growers, the market was obvious. Hey, pasta without vino is like spaghetti without wine. So, at a time when other growers were ripping out grapevines to plant plum trees, Sonoma's Italians kept their vineyards working, producing grape juice for do-it-yourself wine. And by the time Prohibition finally ended, Italian families owned 70% of Sonoma's, grape juice vineyards. But what a break! Without those vines, the wine country would have been, well, California prune country. Almost overnight, grape juice gave way to renewed wine production. No need to start over from scratch here. Literally years of recovery time were saved. So, vivo Italiano, molto grazie! And not just for past benefits, because the Italians are back. The Italian varietals, I mean. Like the Rhone Rangers bringing back French wines, another group, the Consorzio Calitalia, is promoting wine in the Grand Tuscan and Piedmont styles. Not surprisingly, Sonoma wineries dominate the membership list. The Italian stallion of California vineyards is the Barbera grape, a versatile actor capable of playing robust reds or fragrant rosés. It is by far the most widely produced Italian varietal in the state. Next among the reds, and rising fast in Sonoma, is the Sangiovese grape, a king of Chianti and full of swagger. But keep an eye out for this star of the future, the elegant Nebbiolo grape. In Italy, it performs in the wines of Barolo and Barbaresco. It can be a bit temperamental, but what a crowd pleaser. Among the white grapes, Pinot Grigio has been a surprise hit. As a wine, it's one of those precocious child actors, at its best while still quite young. The Arneus grape is known in some venues as Barolo Blanco, or white Barolo. It can be a problem child, too, difficult to tame. Hence its name. Arneus means little rascal. But its performance is quite mature. Big, crisp, and fruity. Now, as we say arrivederci to Sonoma's Italian roots, remember this. When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, here's hoping you have a nice bottle of Sonoma wine to toast Vita Bella with your amore. Because in Sonoma, life is beautiful. Okay, let's talk dirt. No, not talk dirty. I mean dusty, crumbly, silty, sandy, loamy, clumpy, under your fingernails, mud in your eye dirt. Just as surroundings affect people's personalities, surroundings also flavor our grapes. Of course, that includes the weather, temperature variations, and sun exposure, what the French call terroir. But one of the most important factors in any grape neighborhood is dirt. Take the alluvial mounds, those silty deposits piling up at the foot of mountains. That's dirt worn from the hills by rain, wind, and time. Grapes grown in this rich soil can impart hints of herbal flavor in white wines. Grapes grown in the harsh sand and gravel of a dry stream bed tend to get more intense flavors. You know the saying, when the growing gets tough, the tough grapes make great wine. Hilltop soils are different still, often thinner and drier. In some cases, that helps produce deeper colors, higher tannins, plum and cherry flavors. Dry Creek is a surprisingly diverse patchwork of soils, from fertile to pretty flaky. But that suggests an intriguing tasting opportunity. Try this. Sample the same varietals at various tasting rooms, the same grapes grown in different places. Go ahead and taste for yourself the difference that dirt makes. You should know, Dry Creek is Zinfandel country, so it's a great place to sample the dirt difference in that favorite among California varietals. Compare the hints of berry, all kinds, and spices, little pepper, little nutmeg. If you run into a jalapeno, somebody slipped you the taco sauce. All right, now we launch another leg of our winery tour heading west from Healdsburg. Just across Highway 101 is Alderbrook Vineyards and Winery on Magnolia Drive. Picnics on the veranda overlook the vines. A short distance out West Side Road are two neighboring tasting rooms, Armida Winery in 3 geodesic domes, and Mill Creek Vineyards with its distinctive redwood barn and water wheel. Nearby is the elegant Madrona Manor, a magnificent 1880s Victorian country inn set in lush gardens. Its fine restaurant includes an outstanding wine cellar. Heading north out West Dry Creek Road, the first tasting room is at Everett Ridge Vineyards and Winery. One of the valley's pioneer wineries started here more than 125 years ago. Now, as then, it's operated with organic methods. Romantic picnics among the oaks and wisteria are available at the quaint and lovely Lambert Bridge Winery on West Dry Creek. Chardonnay is the specialty here. And up the road, Quivira Vineyards is a Zinfandel lover's must-stop. Their Sauvignon Blanc is exceptional too. Before crossing over Dry Creek to explore the east side of the valley, be sure to check out Raymond Burr Vineyards near the intersection with Yoakum Bridge Road. That's right, it's Perry Mason's winery. Or maybe Detective Ironsides. Depends on your age and cable channel preferences. The tasting room's open by appointment only, but it's worth the extra effort to savor the late actor's exquisite orchid gardens. Near the end of the road is Preston Vineyards, another all-organic maker of big zins. It's also experimenting with French varietals, most notably Syrah. If in luck, your visit will also coincide with owner Lou Preston's special bread-making days for the winery. At the outer reaches of Dry Creek is the J. Fritz Winery on Dutcher Creek Road. It's a bunker built into the hillside. Its gnarly old Zinfandel vines produce some of the best wine in the region. Dry Creek and Dutcher Creek roads meet near one of the valley's most lavish attractions, Ferrari Carano Vineyards and Winery. The visitor center is a Mediterranean palace. The tasting bar is mahogany and black granite. A limestone staircase descends to a simply posh underground wine cellar that holds about 1,500 wine barrels. Stop in for good wine and home remodeling ideas. The F. Taldeschi Winery, further south, is noted for its powerful Zinfandels. And Pezzi King Vineyards on Lambert Bridge Road features zins grown high in the hills lining the valley. Now that's dirt with altitude. Also on Lambert Bridge Road is Dry Creek Vineyards, a highlight of any valley tour. The ivy-covered winery reminds some of a country chapel. Lush grounds, one of the best picnic areas in the wine country, and exceptional wines, and it all rises from a one-time prune orchard. You can credit the little engineer that could make great wine, that is. The winery's owned by a former railroad engineer. All right, that about wraps up our little dirt and Zinfandel tour of Dry Creek. Now, mud baths, anyone? Hello, my name is Mr. David. I will be assisting you this evening. Welcome to our amazingly expensive super shishi. You must be important to even get a reservation here, a restaurant where only snooty wine experts dine. May I take your wine order, please? No, wait, don't hand that wine list to someone else, not even in the face of a haughty waiter. For one thing, you can always rely on the old golden rule. Red wine with red meat, white wine with poultry and fish. It's a little imprecise, but it's a hedge against major disappointments. Another rule is eat big, drink big. We're not talking quantity here, it's big flavors. Big, bold, spicy flavors should be paired with big, strong wines. Red Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, and Zinfandel, or big oaky whites like Chardonnay or Viognier. Delicate light sauces and sweet salsas are better left to the medium-bodied Pinot Noir on the red side or the Sauvignon Blanc among the whites. In other words, it's not so much what you eat, but how it's prepared that most affects the wine choice. To illustrate, let's draft a volunteer, the king of all fish, the salmon. Bake a salmon in fresh squeezed lemon juice, and you'll most enjoy a nice Sauvignon Blanc. Pan-fried salmon with goat cheese, basil, and a lemon sauce intensifies flavors and probably calls for a Chardonnay. Bake it with roasted garlic, that suggests a partnership with a Merlot. And salmon steaks grilled in olive oil go with both red and white, a Pinot Noir or a Chardonnay. A spicy Cajun style or blackened salmon, maybe a hearty Zinfandel. You getting confused? Getting hungry? Well, here's the simplified truth. The one rule that always applies: order what you like. You can't be wrong when you pick a wine you enjoy, no matter what's on the food menu. And here's a hint for getting along with others in a group ordering wildly different entrees. The secret is Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir goes with virtually everything. Mix and mingle entrees, invite carnivores and vegans, no problem. Oh, but if Hannibal Lecter calls, serve him some fava beans and a nice Chianti. Alexander the Grape. Grapes conquered Alexander Valley more than a century ago, and like that Greek kid who took over the world back around 300 BC, Alexander Valley wines are making heads bow. But vineyards were a small part of the original vision for this valley. When pioneer Cyrus Alexander arrived on horseback 150 years ago, he saw it as a cattle ranch. Alexander, also known as Alec, was a former fur trapper and one-time mountain man who went to work for a rich sea captain who owned a big chunk of Sonoma land. The captain's ranch spread across 48,000 acres. Alec brought in 1,000 horses, 14,000 cattle, and 10,000 sheep. He built a grist mill, a tannery, and a lime kiln. He planted wheat fields and fruit trees. Hey, what about the grapes, you ask? Well, Alexander also got around to planting the first vines in the valley, just before the gold rush of 1849. But that was only the beginning. The Great Grape Invasion really got started in the 1880s, with the creation of Italian-Swiss Colony, an ambitious winery operation just south of Cloverdale. It attracted many Italian immigrants, and as I said earlier about the Italians, they worked, they saved. They started their own wineries, and the Alexander Valley wine boom kaboomed. Today, the leading grape gentry of Alexander Valley are members of the Red family, especially Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Zinfandel. And they are a particularly precocious lot, challenging the best of Napa and Bordeaux and winning legions of fans and critics across the country. So if you're ready, here are some winery doors to knock on around the valley. A short distance north of Healdsburg, off Highway 101, is Chateau Souverain on Independence Lane, a palatial wine estate noted for its award-winning architecture. The Chateau Souverain Café is open limited hours on weekends. The Geyser Peak Winery on Chianti Road is a favorite for picnics on an arbor-covered terrace. It's also the official winery of the United States Polo Association. Do Peloponnese now come with wine glass holders? Anyway, tastings at Geyser Peak are a special treat. They feature samples of each varietal making up the sophisticated Meritage blend. That's Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. Some of those are rarely bottled separately. The result is a great education and pleasure for the inquiring palate. Nearby, and still on Chianti Road, is Silver Oak Cellars, or Silver Oak West. It's the Alexander Valley branch of Napa's famous Cabernet Sauvignon specialist, and the winery is as elegant as its wines. Along Geyserville Avenue, just east of Highway 101, Canyon Road Cellars occupies a classic stone building, one of the oldest wineries in Sonoma County. It's an outlet store of sorts, featuring inexpensive wines bottled across the freeway at Geyser Peak. Nearby on Geyserville Avenue is one of Sonoma's largest wineries, Clos du Bois. Its success can be traced to the original partnership of a group of Cornell University classmates from upstate New York. Trentadue Winery completes the little cluster of tasting rooms open along Geyserville Avenue. The family winery specializes in the most muscular of reds, including Sangiovese and a blend the winemakers call Old Patch Red, made from grapes grown on century-old vines. And every Trentadue wine label comes with a toast from the family, Salute et auguri, to your good health with best wishes. Another group of Alexander Valley wineries can be reached out Highway 128, heading east from the town of Geyserville. First along the highway is Delormier Winery, in a modern brown-shingled barn. The winery specializes in blends, including a highly regarded white called Spectrum. At Murphy Good Estate Winery, a picture window near the tasting bar provides a view of the impressive barrel room. But what's most impressive here is what's poured at the bar, consistently elegant wines. Other appealing tasting rooms up the road include Stryker Sonoma Winery, with its views of vineyards and mountains, and Johnson's Alexander Valley Winery, with its 1924 theater pipe organ. What do you think? Bach for reds, Mozart for whites? At least two more Valley wineries along Highway 128 deserve visits before you're over the hill, and into Knights Valley, I mean. The charming redwood-paneled bar at Fieldstone Winery and Vineyard is consistently rated among the top tasting rooms in Sonoma and Napa counties. But don't miss Alexander Valley Vineyards, the homestead and final resting place of the old pioneer who gave the valley its name. The valley's first schoolhouse, a white classic with a steepled bell tower that Alec built, is a guest house on the winery estate. And a fig tree they planted in 1850 still bears fruit and offers shade. And amid all that rich history, there's good wine. One of the winery's top labels is its popular Sin Zin. Visitors can sample the Zinfandels, Merlots, and Cabernet Sauvignon around a cozy fireplace in the comfortable and homey tasting room. It won't take long to understand why a roving mountain man decided that this was the place to stop roaming, and why so many magnificent grapes have likewise put down roots in Cyrus Alexander's beautiful valley. Sonoma Hollywood. As you travel the byways of Sonoma, you may have a moment or two along the way of déjà vu, like you've seen some of this before. Well, chances are that it wasn't your imagination, it was Hollywood's. Not surprisingly, Sonoma's beauty was long ago discovered by the location scouts of movies and television. The grounds of Corbel champagne cellars along the Russian River? That was France in the World War II TV series Combat. And way back, I'm talking before talkies, Beatrice Michelina and Corbel's vineyards shared the silent screen in a 1916 film version of Faust. And Hopkiln Winery on the West Side Highway? There, Jimmy Stewart played a winemaker who refused to sell out to a rich meanie who stole his collie to get even. Dog napper, how low. But you can guess the happy outcome. It was Disney's 1978 The Magic of Lassie. Beyond the wineries, Sonoma's towns and countrysides have starred too. Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds terrified Rod Taylor, Suzanne Plachette, and the rest of us from Bodega Bay on Sonoma's coast. And Petaluma played a small Midwestern town for teenage Ron Howard, Richard Dreyfuss, and Harrison Ford in the 1973 classic American Graffiti. A residential street in Santa Rosa was New England for Haley Mills in the 1960 Pollyanna, and Bruce Willis battled bad guys in 1990 at the Santa Rosa Air Center, the location stand-in for a Washington, D.C. airport in Die Hard 2: Die Harder. I've already mentioned some of the Hollywood figures among Sonoma wine producers, like the late actor Raymond Burr and the Smothers Brothers. But there's also the late TV comedian and perennial mock presidential candidate Pat Paulson. He raised grapes between campaigns in his Alexander Valley area vineyards. But there's no confusing who is the biggest star, the grande dame, the scene stealer, the people's choice, the celebrity giant of Sonoma. It's the wine. And as Mr. DeMille could tell you, she's always ready for her close-up. Well, thanks for keeping me company through the valleys of Sonoma. Let's do it again sometime. How could anyone resist a place with such good looks, great wine, and so much attitude? Ah, the Sonoma Difference. Which reminds me of one more story, about 3 wise men from Sonoma. No gold, frankincense, or myrrh here. Maybe a silver spoon or 2. See, these 3 were sons of Sonoma wine families, John, Jeff, and Mike. Coming out of college in the early 90s, these sons of Sonoma saw a lot of their Generation X contemporaries turning to beer or margaritas without so much as a glance at the wine list. Why? Those drinks are thirst quenchers, but they're hardly a complement to fine food. Was a new generation of would-be wine consumers intimidated by the long wine lists? Or unsure because of their limited wine knowledge? Well, some were both. Others regarded wine as the Oldsmobile of beverages, something of their parents' day and age. Well, John, Jeff, and Mike fought back, guerrilla style. Now, as I should have mentioned, John is a Sebastiani from the Vianza winery. Jeff is one of those notorious bun shoes from the family that likes to hold up the Napa wine train. And Mike is a San Giacomo from a vineyard family with Sonoma roots going back to the 1920s. They set out to prove that wine is for adults of all ages and tastes, but especially that wine ain't your mama's grape juice. And they took their guerrilla tactics to the finer diners of the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, they raided nice upscale restaurants all over town. They barged right in and accosted beer-drinking diners. Right there at the tables, the Sonoma boys challenged those diners to impromptu taste tests. A bite of food, a sip of beer. Nothing special. Then one of the guys would bring out a nice bottle of Sonoma's finest. A bite of food, a sip of wine. Voila! The spices were suddenly spicier. The herbs were herbier. Of course, tableside conversions flourished, and the audacious raids drew loads of publicity. Who were these restaurant raiders? Press accounts dubbed them the Wine Brats, and the name stuck. And that's how a brash trio of Sonoma wine guys started what today has grown into a national association of young wine enthusiasts. And they're still brash. The Brats will offer wine pairing advice for Chinese takeout, pepperoni pizza, and chips and dips. Potato chips, youth. What does it know about cholesterol?
But the Brats will also offer more practical advice, like how to build a wine cellar in your bathroom just in case you're not flush. Don't you love a place with great wine and a lot of sass? Sure, Sonoma started with the rich endowment of Mother Nature, and it had the good fortune to be discovered by the grape. But Sonoma's attitude comes from its history, from the people who survived pests and prohibition, market booms and busts, tragedies and calamities of all kinds. And in the end, it's all there in every glass of Sonoma wine. All the spunk of that flower queen and the tens of thousands of immigrant mamas and papas. All the dash and daring of Hungarian colonels and Mexican generals. All the spirit of the samurai, the mystic, and the mountain man. All the magic of generations of winemakers. So a closing toast to Sonoma and to the Sonoma Difference.
You know, I work with what I'm given. The man write the words, I say them. He don't want an S, he should not put an S. Nearby on the highway is Imagery Estate Winery, one of the Bedziger family wineries. Nearby on the highway is Imagery Estate Winery, one of the Benziger. Benziger. Glenellen. That one's operated by Kendall Jackson and features some of its other popular labels from Sonoma, including Gassy Creak and Belch.
Mama, when are we going to get there?
In rural Italy, households typically made their own wine in Mama's cucina. Oh God. I'm going to try this one more time. I have to stop. Oh God, I have to stop. I can't get past Mama's cucina. And further out the highway, Sawsell Winery. And further out the highway, Sawsell Winery. And further out the highway, Sawsell Winery. Further out the highway, Sausal Winery. And further out the highway, Zauzel Winery serves up some of its Zinfandels made from vines planted here about the time Thomas Alva Edison was inventing the light bulb back in New Jersey. And further out the highway, Sausal Winery serves up some of its Zinfandels made from vines planted here about the time Thomas Alva Edison. Okay, I'll just turn out the light bulb. At least two more Valley wineries along Highway 128 deserve visits. No, they don't. Or take the management of that venerable winery, Gunlock Bunshu. I know. Back off. Or take the management of that venerable winery, Gunlock Bunshu. Or rename the management. Now keep an eye out for Laguna Road and the historic winery of Martini and Bunshu. Stop recording. Go away. I have a plane to catch at 7 tomorrow morning. What do you think? Bach for red, Mozart for white? Rossini for rosés, Schoenberg with schnapps, Tchaikovsky with chai tea. I'm going on now.